Test, 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 test.
right, it's 2 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 2. All right. In accordance with the evolving public health declarations, we're temporarily limiting public attendance to the first 10. We have our first 2 right here. Thank you for coming. Let's see. Do we have any committee or public comments? Anybody on the telephone for the nope? Okay, very good. Then let us go to item 3, Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority. Let's see, item A, committee to discuss actions taken at the IWVGA board meeting on the 12th of May and potential action items moving forward. Stan.
The GA hearing on the Searles Valley Mineral replenishment fee has been continued to the June 9 Groundwater Authority meeting. In the meantime, the Orange County Superior Court hearing of May 20th was continued to May 26th. And it turns out, based upon what I can see and understand from listening to it from the audio. Did you listen to the audio, by the way, Don?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I think the Groundwater Authority won the Mojave Pistachio Challenge, the replenishment fee, it would seem to me, and the Searles Valley Minerals Challenge has been continued to June 17th. So there's still some additional information, and a lot of that has to do with the same information that was the reason for the GA hearing being extended to June 9th. The shallow well mitigation study is ongoing, and it's funded by the replenishment fee. The transient water pool and following project continues. No new status was given at the last meeting. Part of that is due to the fact there's no funding for the GA, but obviously the program isn't dead because there can be transactions between the farmers. The recycled water alternative study continues. The Water District, the city, and the GA are attempting to scope a program. And how the GA is funding that right now is unknown. The TSS monitoring well in El Paso area continues. That project continues. And that is funded by the state grant. The Rose Valley COSO royalty-funded monitoring well is starting up, and I think they're hoping to do well drilling this fall. There was a new ordinance came before the board, emergency conservation restrictions ordinance that was sort of misrepresented. I think we were told that it was initiated by the Water District, and apparently that's not the case. We already have our own ordinance associated with conservation, and best of my knowledge, it's because of certain areas of the county not having a conservation ordinance. And this will then basically they want to have something compatible with what the Water District is doing. In terms of outstanding issues, there was a finance report included in the May 12th agenda package. The report was basically a cash basis report rather than an accrual report. So you couldn't really tell what the total obligations were or the accruals are. You know, bottom line is from the report, I couldn't tell where money was being spent or where the money was coming from. And basically the answer that I got to all my questions was it's a work in progress. I asked about half my questions that I had prepared, and then I decided not to say anything more. It turns out there will be another GA meeting before our next Water District meeting. So hopefully we'll get some additional answers to the finance report at this next meeting. Another outstanding issue, which I feel very strongly about, is the PAC and the TAC participation needs to be increased significantly. We keep giving lip service to it at the GA, but I don't see anything happening. Neither the PAC or the TAC chairpersons are attending the GA meetings, and I'm hoping that I made a comment at the end of the last GA meeting, and I hope that will be solved at this next coming one. We need to start, next topic, we need to start planning a dust mitigation program. If any of the farmers actually do any fallowing in the near future, we need to have something at least in the planning stage so that we don't have a dust bowl here. Also, we need to start having the schedule discussed at each one of our board meetings. We've become way too lax. A good example of that is the 2020 annual report. I understand that the TAC was given it before it was released, but we're talking few days and no time to do anything real.
Dan, quick question. When you say discuss more frequently at our board meetings, you're talking about the Groundwater Authority board meetings?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, yeah.
That's all right.
And we need to get started on our 2020 audit. As you recall, we've done our 2018 audit and our 2019 audit. They took longer than what they should because they had a hard time trying to get a hold of the data. And we're actually 5 months into, almost 6 months into this fiscal year for the GA. And so that we need to have that audit started. In fact, normally one would like to see their audit 5 to 6 months after the start of the fiscal year. And then last but not least, the waiver for the man camp has still not been addressed. So we need to continue to push for that. So at this point in time, you want to open it up to the public?
Well, let's hear from Don. Don, is there anything you'd like to add?
No, I don't think, I think Stan's covered it
Okay,
pretty well. I have nothing to add.
all right. Do we have any questions or comments from the public? Please state your name and city of residence.
My name's Mike Neal, if you're in Ridgecrest. It's hard for me to actually say how appalled that I am to have listened to that GA meeting and listened to Mr. Rotora try to get just some rudimentary financial information from the staff members. Number one, I guess, we're supposed to have a general manager now, but almost all those questions were answered by the city lawyer, which unfortunately continues to point out the fact that the lawyers run the show here, which should not have ever been the case, certainly should not be the case at this point, but obviously that's the fact. However, running the show, they proved themselves to be incompetent in something that should have went well in hand for the last couple of years and right there on data sheets and the information readily available to give to Mr. Rotora at the meeting. They can't do that. It's because they've been shooting at the hip. I'll point you back to a prior statement by Mr. Gleason, who indicated the general attitude. We don't need no finance committee. We don't need an audit, whatever. We're just basically trust us. Just trust us. We're taking care of all this. Well, I'll tell you how most of the people in this valley feel about trusting them. They ain't going there because they haven't done anything to show that they are trustworthy or competent to run the most important issue that's going to be affecting people's lives from now on in this valley. So my point is, and I've pointed this out in other aspects, this district should have a real healthy disrespect and distrust of the Groundwater Authority and be considering seriously withdrawing from such.
All right, thank you for your comments, sir.
Judy Decker, Ward Street. Mike actually brought up something that I had deliberately forgotten, but it's time to bring it up again. Stan brings it up every month. You can't really listen to the GA board meeting. You can only listen to parts of it. sometimes 50% of it is not, you can't hear it. When is the GA going to get brave enough to open up and have a real public meeting? Thank you, Stan, for your support.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone on the telephone waiting to speak? Thank you. Anybody else? Dan, anything else to add? Any more
No,
committee
I was
comments?
curious, Don, are you aware of any opening up of the meeting?
Yeah, there has been some discussion of possibly the meeting this month, this next month being open to the public. It hasn't been decided for sure yet, but there has been talk about it because obviously we're seeing more and more improvement in the coronavirus situation. And, you know, if right now Kern County's in the orange, and if they can get into the yellow, the discussion was there's really no reason why we can't have limited public participation in the meeting, so. Sorry?
They won't be in the yellow for the meeting, according to yesterday's newspaper. It said the soonest the county could be in the yellow would be June 9th, and I believe the meeting's June 8th. But on June 15th, supposedly, the governor is going to open the state. So I presume the July meeting will be open.
Even under orange, you can do 25%, which we've been doing for our meetings here. Of course, we
Yes,
don't have
thank
the
you very
capacity
much.
we don't have the capacity that the council chambers does. But
Yes, I enjoyed the meeting I came to the first of the month. Thank you.
Well, and the city has been opened up at 25%.
City council.
The council,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, the city
No,
council.
no, I'm just
Yeah,
making sure I understand.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Is there anybody on the telephone? Okay, thank you. All right. Is there anything else, Stan? If not, we'll move on to item B, committee to review and discuss the Navy Coastal project list. All right. Don, you want to lead us through this?
you've got a copy of the 2022 proposed project list for the
Yes.
Navy Coastal Royalty funding. And we had reviewed it internally, including Tim Parker, and Tim Parker summarized our comments on the memo that you have.
Right. Parker Groundwater.
So, those are the projects that are as prioritized by the Groundwater Authority. But obviously, I'll remind you that the final decisions at the discretion of the Navy. They could have projects on the base. This is for both infrastructure and energy. So if the Navy has some energy projects that they deem to be more of a higher priority than the projects on this list, it's up to their discretion to decide which projects to be funded.
So the GA prioritization is really kind of more a friendly consultation for the Navy?
For the Navy, yes. And the Navy has funded projects for the Groundwater Authority since the funding was made available. So it just depends on what the Navy has on their project list and how these fall into that priority.
Are we looking to get a prioritization from the Water District today, or a recommendation to the board?
Well, we had input into this. We did have input into this.
Yeah, that was the Parker letter.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Was that the Parker letter?
Yes.
Okay. And is this 2022 prioritized list, is that the GA prioritized list or the Navy prioritized list?
This is the Groundwater Authority's prioritized list.
Okay.
Projects were developed primarily through Stetson, but with, consultation from, and we had some input from the Water District. I don't believe it went to the TAC. It did go to the TAC, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Did the TAC meet, or was it just written comments sent to the?
Any interaction with
need
the
to
public has to be done with a
For
microphone since we're
recording, you need
streaming.
to go to the microphone, Mr. Decker.
Sorry.
The participation of the TAC for 14 months has been written comment, some interaction directly with Stetson, and the reports that we are writing individually are not being posted. So the other TAC members, there's no dialogue, basically. No one is actually communicating with any of the other members. So it's not a full value by any means. But Eddie Teasdale and myself have been the consistent participants in those TAC requests, and there have been probably 20 different documents and project areas that we have written reports into.
Thank you.
I guess, Don, now that you're responsible for this, but you're the closest thing we got to someone who has knowledge, can you explain why they're in Project 3, they have got a aquifer storage and recovery well in there rather than a deep water injection well?
Project number 3?
Yeah, the IPR, DPR pilot study. The 1 to 3rd bullet is a aquifer storage and recovery well. I mean, if we're talking about IPR, then we would need a deep well injection. And that would go along with what Krieger and Stewart are sort of pushing. But I guess my feeling is that an awful lot of the IPR and DPR stuff is fairly well known. And what we need to be doing is looking at bits and pieces and pulling some plums or cherries out of what Krieger and Stewart is trying to organize in terms of a recycled water program to see if we can't get some of the grant money from here put into what we're trying, where we're trying to go. But this is all kind of all put together a little before Krieger and Stewart started their
Yes,
effort.
yes. And I'm not sure that, looking at this project was put on here again before I think there's been determination that the deep well injection is the way to go. And so I'm not so sure that this project, as it's listed, is something that the Groundwater Authority would want to pursue necessarily.
Yeah. Well, it's not real clear what it is either. I mean, I don't know.
We have yes, sir, go ahead.
I don't know whether I should interrupt your discussion, but I can add some content to the discussion. Mr. Ritora, you are absolutely correct in your comment there that these project summaries are less than complete in terms of detail. There was nothing else really submitted to the TAC beyond this. Those of us that did participate, however, did in fact provide substantial additional comment, and the deep well injection is absolutely the only project that is going to give us any real benefit. And we really don't need a pilot study and what we'll get out of that pilot study. A lot of the projects that are showing up on various lists look more like projects to provide somebody's well-being. They're not necessarily lined up very well with actual need.
May I ask, has the TAC actually been asked to put together a set of projects that the TAC thinks would be pertinent or beneficial?
Well, there was no request in that regard. However, myself and I think Eddie Teasdale both provided ample comment and technical criticism, not emotional criticism, but professional criticism of the various projects that were proposed. This list has existed for some time, and it's been worked over very recently. So the fact that there's some new information that you guys are, pursuing through Krieger and Stewart, there's no reason why that direction wouldn't be actually directly influencing this list. I think this is just almost a placeholder. I'm being rough when I say that, but
It's just the list as it is now, and we can expect an update with different prioritization.
well,
Is that what you mean?
no, it didn't quite mean, I think it would be nice if that could happen.
Okay.
There are things here, and as you go down the list, if I may, I can stand up and provide some additional comment. The magnetotelluric study, in particular. We were just to eastern Nevada mining country, just got back yesterday, and I'm really kind of up to speed in the general sense of what they're doing there in the way of geophysical exploration. I'll provide you some comments.
I would think this list, I would expect it to be refined based on the comments submitted by Mr. Decker and Eddie Teasdale and Tim Parker.
Yeah, those
Because
seem like they're the three that are actually participating seriously.
Right. So the list you have just reflects the original draft, and I would expect and hope that they would consider the comments that have been submitted and refine this list.
Well, what I see is that Stetson, they acknowledged that we did in fact submit our reports. I gave them about 5 pretty dense pages. It wasn't fluff on this exact subject. And, Mr. Johnson oftentimes acknowledges that I have participated in giving them a report. But in terms of response to my suggestions, sometimes it's taken up, usually it's as if it's ignored. And in the case where there's formal feedback to, people that submitted, like to the GSP, the matrix that gets put together, a lot of the comments back to the individual authors was frankly insulting.
May I ask you just a quick couple of questions, just to clarify? You're on the TAC, yes?
Yes, I am.
And obviously you're very familiar with this. Is there a difference in the prioritization of this list that you would promote?
Well, before you start drilling wells anywhere, you really ought to have some geophysics or a much closer look at what we do understand about subsurface geology from the wells, and that's not happening. As a matter of fact, the El Paso well, EP1, was located in a spot that was available in the sense that it was heavily impacted by sheep. It was a sheep corral from time long gone when the drives were going on, and that was a nighttime corral holdover. And it was used over and over and over and over, and there's not a stick of living anything on it, except for the rattlesnake that came out when the drill rig was buzzing the ground. But so the locations and the location of the wells in the Little Lake Notch area, Rose Valley, those are all areas that will be easily permitted through the BLM. And that certainly has to be a factor. But if you don't have a plan going in for the location and what you intend to discover, you have no real technical guidance at all. And myself, I have provided such, and it's, as far as I can see, has been ignored.
So I can draw some assumptions then Project 5 or some species of Project 5 would be at the top of your list, the
Well,
magnetic telluric
The
study.
problem, yes, maybe you're asking a question that was what I was going to comment on. You know, the geomagnetic, geophysical methods are limited by the resistivity of the soil, the lithographic materials you're going to explore, and you typically can get useful signals only from the top few hundred feet. And if that's your area of interest, well, of course, you should pursue it. That's one reason why SkyTem hasn't given us basically anything. If you can't discover the top of the groundwater in the basin or up on the gradient coming from the mountain front, if you cannot discover by your method, whatever it may be, you can't discover the top of the groundwater, the saturated zone, your method would appear to be basically of no value so far as, our concerns, our interest in basin groundwater. And that's exactly the situation with SkyTem. And I think that will be exactly what the aspect that will be discovered here. Some water is shallow enough to actually see signals from, but there are many dry wells in the fans coming from the Sierra that are amazingly deep and amazingly dry. So the flow from the canyons is not what we, in our imagination, think it is. The frontal fault is a substantial barrier fault, and the leakage through that fault is something we should try to explore. But most of the water that you're going to try to find is going to be deep enough that the magnetotelluric methods simply won't discover it. My suggestion was shallow seismic with a modern tomographic analysis, like a CT scan for your internal body. And you can actually see the top of the groundwater easily. And of course, the structural features, the barrier fault, and whatever details may be there can be discovered as well. That was my suggestion
Okay, all right, thank you.
for this.
Right, and I don't see anything like that on this list.
No, there's nothing like
Right, okay, thank you very much.
It's similar from a functionality standpoint, it's just not as deep. I mean, it's, what they proposed is something that's got more limitations than the process. They are trying to characterize, right, aren't they, or not?
if I don't fall down here. Yes, they are. And to that extent, they have listened to me. I've been hammering on this subject since day one. That is, before you drill any more wells, you need to have a understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, and from that, a location. And then you start looking for maybe a disturbed area that, could at least approximate what you were trying to accomplish. But Stetson has used an outfit in Arizona that's given them a bid for this magnetotelluric effort, and that's where the numbers come from, the dollar numbers. The shallow seismic, I don't have any, bids in the top of my head, but it's a fairly simple thing to do. And you don't have to lay out seismic lines like in the old days.
They got a thumper.
Well, yes, we're talking about shallow, so we're not using explosives
Right.
at all. But the thing that made the old system so time-consuming and literally painful was every one of the microphones that you set out is connected back to the truck with a cable, and it might be a half a mile long. And every time you move to a new location, all of that setup, all 50 of your stations got to be all rolled back up and all that. Even a strong man's going to wilt, frankly. But the new method every station is communicating with the truck with just what amounts to Wi-Fi.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any additional discussion?
No, I think this was good. And I guess I would like to see well, I do want to see the TAC more involved, and I'd like to see them get involved at the level of them suggesting ideas. And then just getting them more involved in general, so. But no, this is good.
All right. Mr. Neal?
Yes, Mike Neal again. Nothing technical here particularly addressing this, but some things that have come out. And what Mr. Decker has had to say, two different statements, basically. The first, which is really disturbing, but yet points out, I think, what has been the general attitude of the GA staff since day one. Here sits a man who's probably got as much knowledge on these areas as the sum total of Stetson Engineering staff himself. Been involved in this for 40 years plus. On this committee, they have a committee, supposed to have a committee. Oh, get a committee, put all these people on it, listen to your feedback. Well, apparently, they don't listen to their feedback. In fact, some of the response they give to the TAC members, prominent TAC members, was quoted as being insulting. Well, that's unacceptable. For the GA staff to have that kind of attitude simply indicates that, we're running the show here. We got our experts. We're going to follow our agenda, and we don't really care what you little citizens have to say about it. So, we had to have a committee, so you get to sit there and take all your time on a committee, and you get to write up 5-page dissertations on your responses, but we don't care. We don't really care what you have to say. And then what do you get? You get a list, which, Mr. Dicker was nice enough not to say it, but I will say, it's a make-work list. Bunch of projects, first one on the list, $2.4 million. Well, how do you think they spent all this money over these years? And here we are, basically at the same point we were when we first started, making the same kind of statements about recharge that people were making 4 years ago after spending millions and millions of dollars doling out to all these projects, doling out to all these companies, and, could have had it for $25, basically. But, no, we had to pay the lawyers, we got to pay the consultants, we got to go on this whole road because this is how money wasting, time wasting, incompetent agencies conduct themselves. And should this is a primary example. And what you've heard from Mr. Decker, primary example of all that. And I've had enough of it. And I think hopefully a whole bunch of people in this valley very soon are going to be able to say, I've had enough of it. Let's be done with it.
Great, thank you for your comments. Is there anyone on the telephone? Nope, all right. Judy Decker.
Yes. I brought up to the GA board many times when they started talking about wastewater use, that the water district had done years worth of tests and studies on this issue with the Krieger and Stewart firm. And I presume that finally now that Stetson is using Chuck Krieger on your behalf to discuss this issue. Is that correct? And that you have given, or he has given his previous studies to Stetson?
We have provided them with the studies that the Water District has done, and Stetson is working with Krieger and Stewart now on recycled water project.
Good.
The feeling of the board, and I'm sure I'm conveying them accurately, was that just pretty much giving I think the budget for the study was something like $500,000 total for the project, and then $60,000 to do a study. It wasn't really a study, but it was looking at existing studies and coming to some conclusion. And we felt that, as you said, there's already existing studies that we could already take advantage of and do it a lot cheaper. So the Groundwater Authority, the staff was willing to, engage with Krieger and Stewart and get them involved. And from the board's perspective, you know, we feel like getting some of that recycled water, a portion of it, or even all of it, is advantageous for our customers, and we should be actively pursuing it. So since we are one of the two potential customers, we wanted our consultants involved in determining the proper use for it.
Right,
Because as you know, they were looking at, the GA is looking at percolation study. That was a $60,000 study, I believe.
right. Well, the water
And-
district did a percolation study.
And I think almost everybody realizes that that's not efficient use or effective use of that water. You're gonna lose a lot of it. And also, putting it in a pond, it just, you know, it's not gonna go down to the deep aquifer like it needs to go. So deep well injection is the ideal.
Yes, not only would a pond not reach the groundwater, it would create a duck problem like Searles Valley Minerals had a few years ago. Think about that.
We already have a goose problem, then we'd have a duck problem too.
Well, goose, duck,
Duck,
Yeah.
duck, goose, it'd be crowded.
yes.
All right.
And it may take years, but I know one issue that we had over at Searles when I was over there was, as you know, the wind blows quite a lot, and
What?
wind-blown dust accumulating in those ponds, after a while, you're losing capacity. So you have to
Oh,
go in there and
yeah,
clean
right
it
in.
out. So.
Okay. Stan, did you have anything else you'd like to discuss on this topic? Dawn?
No.
All right, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your comments. With that, we'll move on to item 4, brackish water study.
Department of Water Resources, it had been quite a while since they had an update on the project, so a web meeting was scheduled with Tony Pizzetti from DWR. She's actually being transitioned over to a Sigma branch, and I think her replacement is, I believe it's Jennifer Polito. I might be getting that last name wrong, but she was on the call as well. Tony indicated that since she's been involved in this project from its inception, that she wanted to continue to see it through to the end. So she would be working with Jennifer. So we scheduled a web meeting for, it was May 12th, I believe it was. Wade Major from Aqualogic, Tim Parker, myself were on the call with Tony and excuse me, this is, somebody's calling. So we gave them an update on the project to date. I think it had been a few months since they were updated prior, so we just brought them up to date that the fact that there was an aquifer test that was in progress. And that meeting was followed up with a meeting with the brackish group, the study group, all the participants on the next day to give them an update on the preliminary results of the aquifer test. All the data has not been gone through. In fact, some of the next steps, which we conveyed to Department of Water Resources, to Tony and Jennifer, were some sampling of Neal Ranch 1 and 2 to determine possible specifications, if you will, for the reverse osmosis membrane on a treatment facility. We've come to find out that NR2 is open. There was a problem with NR1 that can be remediated, but funding in the project was questionable whether we had enough funding to sample both wells. Rod Stiefvater from Mojave Pistachio, Paul Nugent, and Josh Nugent were on that call on the 13th, or on that web meeting. And when there's a question about the financing, Mr. Stiefvater stepped up and said if there's not funding in the grant, he would be willing to fund the money to provide the funds in order to sample both of those wells. So that was a real positive sign. He's been very supportive of the project. So going forward, I want to finish the evaluation of the data that was collected as a result of the aquifer test, finish cost estimates for a brackish extraction and treatment facility, look at other non-cost factors related to brackish groundwater extraction, and then obviously prepare a draft report on the feasibility study to submit to DWR. I will say that Tony Pizzetti from DWR, she has been very interested and very supportive of this project, and has been, in fact, you may recall, she called in at one of the prior Groundwater Authority meetings to express support for the Brackish Water Project, so. That's pretty much where we are. Again, the focus right now is getting the funding to do the sampling of Neil Ranch 1, Neil Ranch 2. And obviously, well, we haven't submitted an invoice since November 19th, I think, of 2020. So Tony has requested that we put together a progress report and submit the third invoice for the project so that they can process it before the end of the fiscal year. And that's pretty much what I have to report on the Brackish project.
So I ask a question for clarification. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but the state was queried about whether we consider brackish water to be new water or existing water, and their statement was that it would be considered existing water.
Existing water, but that it was beneficial to use it, particularly if it did not result in
Degradation of other fresher sources.
Yeah, one of the consequences that
Yeah, right,
Seven-
serious,
the- the
whatever
deadly
the legal
sins.
definition is of
Yeah.
making somebody's well run dry, right?
right.
Okay, so other than encouraging us, is there some value to their saying that, go ahead and, or are they just saying we wouldn't stop you if you were trying to use brackish water? Or do you think there's any hope they would help?
No, I
future
don't think
projects?
that, no, their response indicated that they would, they're supportive of using brackish water, yeah.
I'm looking to wonder if they had some money in the future they could throw our way to develop.
Yeah, depending on the results of the feasibility study and the report submitted to DWR, and, what their reaction to it is, or their comments, the next step could be to submit another grant application for the treatment facility, a pilot treatment facility.
Are you referring to Tim Parker's, wasn't an email, it was a tech memo that came from you probably can't see it, it was dated,
Oh, and never,
April 22nd, you
his
sent
summary of his phone conversation with Craig
Right,
Altair, I
exactly.
believe it was, yeah.
Well, what he has stated here is, it would be okay, basically, I'm not going to go through all the words here, if it helped to alleviate chronic groundwater declines in other parts of the basin and was making unpotable water supply usable. And I guess and that was, of course, the part of the question that the board had that we were trying to, talk to Tim about. And I don't see a tie-in between the current, I mean, maybe, I'm not saying there isn't, but I haven't seen anybody verbalize a tie-in between the existing brackish water project and what the state seems to think would be a beneficial use for the brackish water. It says it has to alleviate, well, I guess the whole thing is, DWR also agreed that it would be acceptable and logical to consider pumping brackish groundwater and the associated declines in the groundwater level and storage to not be undesirable result, as this would not be considered significant and unreasonable if it helped to alleviate chronic groundwater declines in other parts of the basin and was making an unpotable water supply usable. And I guess that really is the issue, is how do we convince the state that what we currently have as a project really is going to be beneficial. And what the state has said is basically motherhood. It's stating the obvious, pretty much, and I don't see a connection between what they're saying and what we're doing.
Well, I think what they're saying is if we can use the brackish water resources that are in the area that we know of in the northeast part of the basin in particular, and treat that water and use it and reduce pumping, and for example, the Southwest Wellfield, that would be beneficial because you'd be not creating the drawdowns, if you will, in the Southwest Wellfield that you're creating now. I think that's what I'm interpreting what they're saying.
Yeah, my interpretation was, yeah, go ahead and treat the brackish water, but we're not gonna give you credit for it being new water. That doesn't help you achieve your sustainability goals, but it does help you manage the water supply in the valley.
Yeah, but it also costs more money to treat that brackish water at the same time.
That's true, absolutely.
So, I mean, Tim,
Hence my question, did they give us any indication they might be willing to throw
Would you
some more
not
money
also
at
be
it?
extending the life, if you will, of the better quality water in the Southwest if you're using that water that is currently unusable and treating it? I know there's a cost associated with it, but there's also a cost associated with using up all the good water in the basin, if you will.
You could treat it, you could blend it. There was a couple of other proposals that were interesting about use for the water, yeah. That would avoid those other two efforts, okay?
yeah, I guess I would like to see, when you look at the cost of this versus the cost of other potential augmented water ideas and efforts,
Well, part of the project is determining the cost. We don't have the cost right now.
yeah. Well, yeah, and if what we're doing right now actually will at least give us a real cost of what it's going to cost for doing this, then it'll be a benefit. But, right now, it still looks like somewhat of a science project to me until we tie, everything together so that it's really beneficial.
As I said, one of the next steps is determining the cost of treating it and using it.
All right. We have a comment from our visitors.
This is Don Decker again. Mr. Zadiba, I think you're absolutely on the mark with your comment about needing to know costs so that the project can fit in or not fit in. One thing that seems to be ignored in the discussion of the brackish water utilization is the fact that the commercialization of brackish water treatment has decades-long, large-scale experience. The Israelis are desalinizing Dead Sea water that's substantially worse than Neil Ranch. Neil Ranch is about 3,000 parts per million. And I think, building a pilot plant to treat that 3,000 ppm more or less water isn't nearly as valuable as knowing what the drawdown consequence would be to pump water from, the deeper zone there at, say, Neil Ranch. The brackish water project has been moving around this basin from one place to another, starting really at the China Lake Playa in the very beginning, up to Inyo County, and now back down to Neil Ranch, which probably makes the most sense of the off-base locations. But the question is, what will be the consequence of pumping there? One thing to keep in mind is that 1,600 feet thick layer of organic clay that's the source of that 3,000 parts per million water. When you dewater that, if you dewatered that, you're going to see, without a shadow of a doubt, wholesale subsidence. So there needs to be some more serious consideration beyond just pumping. That makes sense to you guys?
Yeah. By the way, has the TAC been pulled in to look at what's been going on in brackish water study?
No. There's not been any contact with any of the TAC members that I'm aware of.
Well, isn't Eddie on the brackish water?
Eddie is, yes, as is Wade. Wade is no longer on the TAC, but he was. What I was going to say was, as you pointed out, the ideal location to do this test is not exactly where we're at right now. I mean, I would be on the base, but the base, they were a participant early on. They're no longer a participant in the study group, but they made it very clear that they wanted to, any testing that was done would be done off base for that concern, the subsidence. They wanted to make sure that if we did a test, it was, that there would not be a significant amount of subsidence. And they said, at the time, they said if we do this test and there's not any significant impact in terms of subsidence, they may consider allowing testing further on the base. I don't know, that was under a different regime. I'm not sure if that's still the way they're looking at it, but that comment was made at one time.
Yes, I'm aware of that, and the problem that, of course, we face is that every area has its own specific and perhaps substantially different variable lithographic content. So where you get subsidence in one area, you don't necessarily have any way to even make some estimates in another area. So the idea of using the brackish water as a temporary, decades-long perhaps, bridge to other solutions has a lot of appeal, since we really don't have many options. But you don't want to get yourself into a situation where not that many years in, you're already seeing, I'll say, the end of the project. You're seeing that the changes that would ultimately limit the project. You don't want to see that just a few years in. You got to avoid that. I would think that a more valuable project might actually be to seriously pump some brackish water from Neal Ranch, from the deeper zone, with some extensometers in place on the surface, and actually see what's happening right from the very beginning, rather than building a pilot plant where you can get all that information commercially already. You don't need to spend that kind of money. You need to spend some consulting money to pull in the data.
Hey, Stan, anything else on this topic?
No, I'm good.
Don?
No, sir.
Anybody in the audience or on the telephone? All right, very good. Seeing none, let's move on then to item 5, alternate water sources. Committee to discuss possible future water sources. Number 1, exploring for a new aquifer or basin, perhaps the El Paso area. Comments, Dan?
Well, I'm the one that's been pushing this, I guess. If you look at the 2020 annual report, in fact, that is the GA annual report, and you look at the GA 2019 annual report, they differ a little bit in terms of the change in the stored water in that El Paso area, but I think in the 2019 annual report, which probably was not reviewed by the TAC, I suspect, but yes or no, you can comment a little later on. Okay, now the recent one is 2020. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and there wasn't, but the 2020 report indicates that there's over 3,000 acre feet per year increase in the storage there. So I know there are skeptics regarding how much water there is coming into that area. On the other hand, if we don't believe our own report, or we're not willing to go in and evaluate it, then either the annual report is wrong, or we're not doing some things that we need to do. And all I'm saying is what we need to do is get Stetson working on trying to evaluate what really is going on in that area before we start spending. If there is honestly more than 3,000 acre feet of water a year, increased water storage down there, we shouldn't be spending money on a lot of other things. In the meantime, we should be looking seriously at that area. Now, if it's not true, that's a different story, but we won't know if it's true or not until we get, did I say Stetson? I meant Krieger and Stewart, going down there and looking at it and maybe doing the type of a study that that Don was talking about earlier in terms of his seismic study, find out what's really going on, because we need to put this to bed. We can't have an annual report that every year comes in and says the water is increasing at 3,000 or 4,000 acre feet per year and have any credibility at all with DWR, if indeed the fact is there isn't any water down there. So that was my only thing, is we need to spend a little bit of money trying to evaluate what the real story is and stop publishing data that we don't have any confidence in. Or if we do have confidence, then we need to actually start doing something about it.
So just to clarify, are you suggesting the groundwater authority investigate further, or the water district?
I don't see any need for the groundwater authority to be involved, quite frankly.
Okay, all right.
My feeling is, we're the ones that need the water. One way or the other, the GA is gonna figure out how to make us pay for it. So why not do it ourselves, be in control of it, and find out truth for ourselves?
Don, any comment? All right. Sir?
Don Decker again. I can add some clarification, I think, to where that 3,000 acre feet comes from and why it is questionable. The El Paso Basin was extensively studied, especially on the west side, by Hunt Oil in the 60s. And those seismic studies have been made available for quite a long time now. And what they're showing from our point of view is that the potentially productive part of the basin is relatively shallow. And that is also proven out with the piezometers, the deeper piezometers in BR1. You actually, in the last 600 feet or so of the 2,000-foot well, you're drilling in continental sediment, probably Ricardo. It's coming up a nice reddish buff color, and very difficult drilling. So if you just take your planimeter and run it around the boundaries of the El Paso Basin and take the increase in levels in BR1 and multiply it, the whole thing together with a reasonable storativity, say 0.1, and you can come up with 3,000 acre feet. But the actual basin that contains water is not the boundary which is on the DWR map. That's more of an artist's conception. That is not water bearing. The same thing is true in this part of the basin too. We have areas here that also are not water bearing at all. So you have to be really careful when you just do simple calculations like resulted in that 3,000. Stetson appears to have spent virtually no time studying the Hunt records. They are obtuse, I'll admit, back in the old days, and you really have to understand what you're looking at to make any sense out of it. Otherwise, it looks just like dancing white dots on the screen. So that helped maybe?
I'm just trying to get some clarity in what's really happening. And my feeling is, until we get our own engineers down there doing something that we think is going to give us an honest answer, all we're going to get is answers from Stetson that a lot of people have no confidence in at all. And I don't think we should be publishing or allowing the GA to publish data that is being questioned by a lot of people, knowledgeable people, on one hand. On the other hand, if Stetson knows what they're doing and their reports are valid, we need to take advantage of it. So we need to get clarity, and I don't see how we're going to do that without spending a little money on our own engineering. That's it.
I do have one last comment that relates to El Paso. The TAC was invited to participate in that project only at the last little bit. And a lot of the preliminary design of the well and all was done by Stetson and DWR staff. Now, lots of strange things happened that I won't talk about here, but the well it's in some strange material. I'll just say it that way. And the original piezometer locations, or two of them were where they were planned, suggested by the TAC. The third that was to be basically at the 1,500 foot point is actually at 1,000 feet because of driller incompetence. And there's not been a final report from Stetson on the project. I think it's a substantial embarrassment, frankly. The one thing that was obtained was the electric log by Pacific Survey, which is a totally competent outfit. Excuse me. And from your resistivity log, you can infer an electrical conductivity and hence a TDS. And the water TDS is substantially higher than was, I think, any of us expected. If it's really that high, the ECs are up in the 2,200, 2,500 micromos per centimeter. And if you multiply by around 0.6, you'll have TDS. It depends on the water chemistry, what that factor is, but just for our purposes here, you know, you can multiply 0.6 times 2,500 to come up with a TDS, and it's not potable, if that's really true. But Jean Moran was, I don't know whether she actually did it or not. I've not been able to contact her. Personally, she was going to take water samples using a air-driven bladder pump and send them off to clinical or whoever. There's not been a report. So all we have is a rather strange formation that was drilled for 1,500 feet. It's actually at what was a sink in a former time. The El Paso Basin didn't freely drain into this basin. There's a dry lake there. And how extensive that is, we don't know. But what we were drilling in was organic to some extent. Dark, greenish black.
In your opinion, was it drilled in the right spot?
Well, it was drilled in the right spot in the sense that the BLM gave us a permit. But as far as, you know, what was it drilled in a location to yield, you know, a maximum of information? That wasn't under consideration.
So the El Paso area, you're saying, is currently a closed basin?
It is to surface water
Okay.
in the central part, like where EP1 is.
Does any of the water from that area drain out? And
Are
it
you-
does, where does it drain?
Are you talking about groundwater?
Yes.
The El Paso fault, which was mapped by Kunkel and Chase in the 60s, passes just south and west of well 18, your well 18. And it's a barrier fault of a significant magnitude, and the head groundwater elevation differences, the head across it is about 300 feet. El Paso Basin stands 300 feet higher on that fault, and that gradient occurs over just a distance, a horizontal distance of, call it a half a mile. It's a very steep drop. And so the El Paso Basin is, at some level, is closed. groundwater-wise,
If
and
it were not, though, it would drain into the Indian Wells Valley?
absolutely.
Okay, thank
Right.
you.
Right, so the question is what, could there actually be 3,000 acre feet of water available to recharge in the El Paso Basin? And in that wet year, 2019, 2020, maybe. But the actual number is probably not 3,000, and it is likely a lot smaller. That's where doing shallow seismic in the El Paso would be extremely valuable. Do it with some modern methods and go after it with the idea, not for looking for oil, looking for, anticlines, but look for the top of the groundwater and
Well,
look,
that might be all we need. I mean, it would be a simple thing to do, and it would solve the problem in a short time with very little money. But in the meantime, what the data in that annual report shows is that over the years 2016 through 2020, well, except for 1 year when it went down 2,000 acre feet a year, it went up on the average of 3,000 to 4,000 acre feet a year. So, and if you look at some of the wells that are being looked at down there and monitored, they show an increasing water level for the last, 10, 15, 20 years.
well, that is, yeah, some do, but that's, it's slight. That's where that 3,000 or 4,000 acre foot number comes from. It's
Oh,
those.
I assume so, yeah.
But there's decreases too. And one thing to think about is, okay, so we have a wet year, and we see some water level increases and we calculate some number. But then we have a year where we lose 3,000 acre feet and then it stabilizes again. That's telling you that the 3,000 or 4,000 is way too big to have those fluctuations going on with no other apparent changes. And the barrier fault, whatever leakage it has, and it no doubt does, it's going to be constant. So you're not going to see a loss. Where did the 3,000 acre feet go? I think that was your question. Yeah, where did it go?
Well, right now, they're saying the water volume in that area is increasing. It's being stored there. I mean,
Well-
that's what, if you believe the report.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that statement. I think the question is, how many data points do they have? Is the basin really
Absolutely.
shallow and highly influenced by
Couldn't
how
agree
much
more.
annual rainfall there is? Or is it that their method of measuring the water level is,
Yeah,
that the
but
numbers they're
in the
getting are within
meantime,
their margin of error?
If the annual report from the GA is giving out bad numbers, we need to know it.
Steve Johnson at the last meeting admitted it was the wrong number.
Yeah, he did. He cast doubt upon it. The problem is that Stetson is not reviewing their material internally properly. They haven't from day one. And some of the chapters and sections and so forth are written by their more junior people. And you can see how many typos and strange sentences and so forth that just slipped right through any review process. I told Steve a while back that I was going to send him an invoice for all the corrections I'd made to their language. And Judy has said
Let
the
me know
same
how that
damn thing.
works, will you?
The English in the document, especially in sections 5 and 6, which the staff were also given, like 3 days before they're due, and they're like 40 pages long.
Yeah.
And some of it, you really have to slow down to read it because the English is practically incomprehensible. And when whoever wrote it, didn't pass my English high school class.
Please keep in mind, we're recording this and broadcasting it, so they can't hear you without the microphone.
I'll say it again. The first thing I said was, Steve Johnson admitted that 3,000 acre feet was wrong. And then what I said was the PAC was given, when the PAC was actually given things, which we haven't been given anything since January 2020. But like Don said, you get it a couple of days in advance. And like you don't have a life, you're going to spend all your time reading this, understanding it, and correcting it. And the English is terrible. Some of the charts were incorrect. I mean, I'm not a technical person, but even I could see that some of the charts were incorrect. And so if they don't review it, how do you know, how does the reader know it's correct if the reader, unless the reader has prior knowledge? But he did admit that the 3,000 acre feet was wrong, and I was going to tell you something interesting. We have known two people that have lived up off of Walker Pass that drains into this side. One of them was the former manager of this water district, Joe Money, and he wanted Don to come and look at his well and talk water, which we did do. And his water, you'd think coming down Freeman Gulch, you'd have wonderful water. It was terrible. It was non-potable. And the other person's water was that way too,
Okay,
for whatever reason.
thank you. Any other on the El Paso? We have one more person.
Yes, Mike Neal. Again, just some observations of what I've been hearing going back and forth here. Well, especially what I just heard. It sounds like if Stetson makes some kind of a statement as to what he thinks things are, like this water in the El Pasos, and what they said was wrong or right, doesn't really matter. Sounds like we're getting basically, we're paying a lot of money, and we're getting a lot of product from a lot of their junior staff members, and from what I'm hearing, I wouldn't believe what they have to say about anything, basically. So on this subject, I think that the water district needs to drive the boat, and let's find out what's going on down there, on our own self, on our own dime, with our own effort. And then if that we could say, hey, there's water to be had there, then we should be able to make first claim to it, instead of, GA has any ability whatsoever to say, well, we're running this show, and, that's in our basin, and we're going to tell, it's there, but we're going to tell you who gets to have some of it. That's not where you want to be at all. I mean, even if there's 1,000 acre feet, for the cost of what they want to charge us for going out and, getting this unobtainable water allocation somewhere across the mountains at over $2,000 an acre feet, that's $2 million a year. Well, maybe it's not real good water and you got to do something with it, or maybe not. We got to do the work, do the study and check it out and find out. You might find that you got at least $2 million worth of water there that you can readily get your hands on. And, ratepayers want you to do that. I'm saying it right now.
All right, thank you for your comment. Stan, anything else? Dawn? Is there anyone on the telephone? Very good. Anyone here, final comments from the audience? All right, very good. Then we'll move on to item 2, investigating the reclaiming of brackish water on the playa. I think that's yours, Stan?
Yes. And of course, the idea was to basically intercept water prior to getting on the playa and doing processing it to make it potable, and at the same time, what if indeed what that does is reduce the amount of ET on the playa, you've got a balance. That is, like, if I can take right now, according to the GSP, we are having about 4,850 acre feet of year basically evaporate on the playa. That's a lot of water. If you could put a line of wells west, the other east, west of the playa, pull water out of the ground, close to the playa so it doesn't interfere with the snort track or anything else. Process that, and the only result being a reduction in water evaporating on the playa, we've accomplished or pulled out 3,000 acre feet of real water. Now, is it new water? Maybe not. However, if you look at the water balance, you pull out 3,000 acre feet and you change the discharge 3,000 acre feet, you're still balanced. There's no change in the total amount of water. So we don't have to worry about, is it new water, is it not new water? Doesn't matter. What it does is takes water that is not usable at this point in time, pulls it out, processes it, and makes it usable. Now, I don't know what the cost of processing brackish water is. Although my feeling is it's been done before by multiple people. And the data ought to be available. We shouldn't have to worry about that. I got and I would like to address a couple of the points that Tim Parker made in a email that he sent to Don Zadiba and then got distributed to, I assume everybody on the board got this email. The first comment he made had to do with the environmental ecosystems and being able to, what would happen if you reduced the amount of ET on the playa? And he says, this can't be done. Basically the environmental people, the Navy and everybody else just is not going to allow it. Well, it turns out if you look in the GSP and you look at the scenario that apparently everybody knows and loves as scenario 6.2, and you look at the future years of ET on the playa, it's down to 1,330 acre feet, which means that they have reduced by the ET by like 3,500 acre feet. So the GSP already is claiming we're going to reduce in order to balance the water in the 2070 timeframe. The GSP already assumes we're going to do this, and the Navy has already reviewed the GSP, I assume, and they found no problem with that. So I see no reason why they would, given a different scenario, not go along with the same thing. His second objection or comment, I guess, was that the Navy's not going to go along with it. Basically, the same thing as, I guess the first one was more environmentalists aren't going to go along with it. The second one has to do with the Navy not willing to go along with it, and quite frankly, the Navy, who we work with here is NAVFAC. NAVFAC gave the city a lot of problems originally with the wastewater treatment plant. The city finally decided to go around the Navy and talk with Kevin McCarthy, and it turns out there's no problem with the Navy anymore. So we need to be careful about assuming we can't do something. What we need to do, we got a problem to solve. We got to solve it, and we can't let obstacles say we can't do this, we can't do that. If we do that, we won't be able to do anything. We actually need to start doing some stuff. We need to be proactive, and my feeling is that Don doesn't really understand the chain of command. The Navy will respond to Congress. His third comment was the district is already working with the Navy on recycled water and brackish water. My feeling is the district is working with the city and the GA for recycled water. We're not working with the Navy. And I don't know if the Navy has a position or not. It doesn't matter. We got the same issue. They will work with Congress because that's where their money comes from. And he also said that we're working with the Navy on brackish water projects. Well, in my mind, we're working with them on a science project, and until I know and have a good feel for the fact that it's really gonna work, I think the original place that we were gonna look at for brackish water was on the Navy base. And the Navy said no. Well, you know, that's true. The Navy objected, and the brackish water people went away. My feeling, if we can demonstrate that we can pull that water out and make it beneficial use, and not contaminate the playa or do anything that's gonna be a problem with the playa, again, that's not a problem. And his last comment was, the water proposed to be captured is all part of the groundwater budget. If you take it out one place, the loss has to be balanced in another place. And he's absolutely true. But he's got it, his logic is backward. We really are taking it out of the playa, and we're taking it out before it gets to the playa, and we're not allowing the discharge on the playa. Obviously, there's a lot of study and ideas that need to be explored. You know, where do you put your set of wells? You know, where is the water from that goes onto the playa really coming from? Because you really need to intersect it in an effective manner. I mean, there's a lot of questions, and I'm not claiming that it's going to be easy, but nothing we do is going to be easy. Anybody who thinks there's an easy answer probably is in the wrong place, because there's not an easy answer. But in any event, my feeling is it's similar to the El Paso area. We need to do some investigation. We need to understand what's really going on. Where does the water going to the playa coming from? What's the possibility of intersecting it, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay,
So
so when you
I'm
say
still-
ET, you're talking evapotranspiration, yes?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, ET is evapotranspiration for those who.
okay, all right. Dawn, any comments?
I guess I'm wondering, what is the direction that this committee is gonna take to the board for action?
Well, before we get to that, let's get some comments from the public then. Thank you. Sir, would you like to say who you are?
I'm Don Decker again. The evapotranspiration today is not primarily occurring at the playa anymore. That's why we see the white clouds of dust when the wind is strong enough. It's coming directly from the playa, and there is still evaporation going on, but the main area for loss is actually the phreatophytic area that's west of the airfield. It's 3 miles long and about a mile wide. You can find it on Google Earth. It's primarily mesquite. A lot of the trees are basically huge. A lot of them are dying. The groundwater is declining there about 6 inches or so per year. And at some point, you know, all of the plants with their roots in the water are going to discover dry soil. So it's not just the Navy, it's not NAVFAC, it's the Center for Biological Diversity and all of the other major players see that phreatophytic area. It's a wetland. It actually has surface water on it, not connected to the groundwater, which I think in their mind, that's almost the same thing. It's got surface water on wet years, just like the playa does. It really is part of the playa, but it's been covered over by more alluvial material that disguises the salts that are present there. So in order to intercept that water, which, by the way, is essentially what Pierre Saint-Amand proposed, 50 years ago? 1984. Yeah, right. It's the same exact idea. And you can, and the galleries in the canyons, you know, when you, especially the galleries in the canyons might make some sense. Mountain Springs Canyon has a stream that flows and basically disappears not that far from the playa. and you could intercept it, it's actually pretty high-quality water. Then it's something the Navy could pursue, maybe to effect. It's going to be high-dollar water, but then everything we look at is high dollar. So it's all relative to some new standard that we have. The new standard is the $1 a liter that it costs you in the grocery store. That's the new standard. Sad as it may be. So that might help you, Stan, understand that number. That 3,400 acre feet is not a modern discharge number. That is a number that was inferred. It's actually in the Kunkel and Chase paper back before we started our major pumping. The gradient, groundwater gradient has been reversed, and we actually are getting water flow draining from that phreatophytic zone. That's where it's going. It's going down to intermediate field and areas like that are taking it. So in a sense, we're already doing it.
Yeah, where did the 4,850 acre feet come from? That's in the GSP.
That, I think, is Kunkel and Chase. And I'm telling you, it comes from an earlier time, not modern.
Well, I thought it was part of the scenario 6.2
No.
DRI
No,
because they call out scenario 6.2 in chapter 3.
the discharge that's associated with the water balance for 6.2 is more like 2,000 acre feet per year.
The, well, if you look at, let me see, my fingers don't work all that well. If you look at
What
table 3.8,
what are you looking at, Stan?
in GSP, I'm sorry. The ET in 2070 is estimated to be 1,330. Now, they say the ET, they don't say where. You know, it could be where you're saying, rather than the lake, could,
Well, it's both, but the predominant
you know,
discharge is not at the playa anymore.
okay. So somehow they have redistributed the pumping in the GSP to reverse the flow of water away from the,
It's going
Simpler
on.
explanation is that the GSP doesn't understand the current situation.
well, that's all part of it.
Well,
You know,
Well-
but again, this is an area where it's been written up, you know, and this is our formal position. And it's definitely going from, in 2035, they say the ET is 2,120, which I think is the 2,000 you're probably referring to. And the 2040, it's 1,950. And when they run the model out to 2070, it's 1,330.
Well, that's all consistent with what's happening. And we are drawing water from that former discharge. That's why that number is decreasing.
Yeah, but in the meantime, again, you gotta, I mean, I don't understand where they got their 4,850.
It came from published reports.
Okay, but in the meantime, what we're gonna do is reduce pumping overall. That is, we're perhaps gonna change where the pumping's coming from. And so we're gonna redistribute where the pumping is coming from. But we're gonna reduce our pumping from 25,000 acre feet a year to 7,650 acre feet a year. And the ET is gonna go down.
Well, don't forget that we won't reach that 7650, that ideal condition. We won't reach that in 2040. It'll be some time after that. As a matter of fact, if you look at 6.2, there, the pumping may be closer to 12,000 acre feet per year in 2040.
Well, there's the transition pool that adds to the 7,650 for sure.
Can be as much as 4,000 acre feet. So the pumping does not reach the 7650 in 2040.
Yeah, well,
I'm going to suggest that this debate could take
Oh,
place
yeah,
offline because there's no way we're going to come to a conclusion, though I do appreciate
right.
the comments.
well, no, well, we need everybody's opinion.
Absolutely we do.
And we need to make sure that our GSP reflects reality.
No, well, yes, that's a little bit above,
Well,
outside our purview currently.
Well, that's true, but, you know, what, if you read the comments, the remarks to the comments made to the GSP, 80% of the comments, the responses to the comments was, well, this is an area that we're looking at and are going to try to resolve in the future. You know,
That was my comment, that many of them are, in fact, disingenuous.
So
Yeah,
Because
I
that
don't
data
disagree, but
already has
yeah.
been taken.
be that as it may, with regard to item 2, investigating the reclaiming of brackish water on the Playa, I don't believe the water district needs to go forward with anything at this point. The water source is on the base, its quality and quantity is in question, and I don't think there's any reason for any kind of activity at the part of our board of directors at this time.
I would like to get down to find out what the real facts are. I would agree that the facts, I mean, we've got a lot of data, a lot of it that disagrees with each other. And if there is a water source out there that we could actually, would benefit us, we need to at least do some preliminary studies to find out whether or not it really will be. But right now, they're saying that we are going to reduce pumping and the ET goes down. When in fact, what has happened since 1920 is as we increase pumping, ET goes down. Well, in my mind, when we reduce pumping, ET should go up. And right now is showing just the opposite. Independent of where the water's pumping is being distributed, it's got to go somewhere.
Okay, we have another
We've
comment
got one
from
more.
public.
Yes, Mike Neal again. As far as all that being on the base property, all I have to say is the base needs to wake up and quit playing their old games with Ridgecrest and telling Ridgecrest, well, everything, that's your problem and you can't come, we're not gonna do anything about anything. Their workforce comes from Ridgecrest. And if this situation continues to go on, they're gonna find that they can go back to whining about not being able to hire people again, because people are gonna say, well, golly gee, it costs too much to live in Ridgecrest, you know, your water costs a fortune there. And that could be an actual fact of life. I mean, in point of fact, my last water bill, I paid probably 230% more for the GA pumping fees than I did for my water. And people say, well, it's not a lot. Well, that's just a silly argument. When you look at your overall tax structure and you're in California, number one, and 230% here and 230% there and 200% somewhere, it adds up to a lot of money after a while. And this thing with the Navy, well, they can figure out that they need to help solve the problem instead of being obstructive and saying, well, we just own all the water in the valley and we're just being nice and letting you use what's left over. Well, that's baloney, and they know that, but they think they can make those statements. I fully support what Mr. Retora has to say and the direction that he wants to go. Like I said before, if we find 1,000 acre feet that we can get use of, that's $2 million that we don't have to pay in rates to the water district or GA or wherever, and that's worth pursuing.
Thank you for your comments. Right. Mr. Decker.
I have one last thing to say. Thank you for letting me speak. I didn't want to say this earlier, but I think I really should. The 7650 was originally agreed upon by TAC and Stetson to be the recharge to the basin. However, if you look at what's going on with pumping scenario 6.2, the 7650 has become, it's morphed into the sustainable yield. In other words, that 2,000 acre feet has already been appropriated, if you will. It's being ignored. It's not part of the water balance anymore. You understand what I'm saying?
Oh, well,
The
yes, except
sustainable
the
yield
tables
is
did-
7650.
You're correct that it wasn't used in the replenishment fee allocation table. I went back and looked at that. That's absolutely correct. But when you look at the GSP table, what they're calling their water balance table, they do include in one area, the 1330 number in their total water balance.
I'm talking about what's going on right now.
Yeah,
The- the
the
al- the-
replenishment fee
The allocation,
allocation table, yes, you're absolutely right, did not include the ET. I couldn't agree more. Okay. No, I agree.
Okay, are there any comments from folks on the telephone? Okay, seeing none? Okay.
Judy Decker again. If you're wanting to make choices, I think this last topic is at the tail end of your agenda, and it ought to stay at the tail end of your agenda. You will have a royal battle fighting the Navy that I do not think is worthwhile.
All right, thank you for your comment. All right, any other commentary? All right, seeing none? Item 6, future agenda items. Stan?
I don't believe so.
Don?
I would, however, like to make a comment that this is the longest meeting I've been in a committee meeting. Since I've been on the board, you've lost control. You need to work on that, David.
I appreciate your comment, Director Rotora. There has been a lot of good discussion and a lot of exposition by members of the Water District Board of Directors. So that took up some of that time.
Yes, and by the way, I do appreciate the attendance of the public. I hope we see more of it in the future.
I'll try to crack down on you a little more and harder in the future, Stan. Don, go ahead.
I would second Director Ratora's comment.
Right, you have no future agenda items?
No, sir.
Okay, then I'm going to ask for adjournment at 3:37. Thank you.